So it's going to increase the gap between rich and poor.
And is there a wealth inequality issue here that will rise from this?
I think in a society which shared out things fairly, if you get a big increase in productivity, everybody should be better off.
Mm.
But if you can replace lots of people by AIs, then the people who get replaced will be worse off, and the company that supplies the AIs will be much better off, and the company that uses the AIs. So it's going to increase the gap between rich and poor. And we know that if you look at that gap between rich and poor, that basically tells you how nice a society is. If you have a big gap, you get very nasty societies in which people live in walled communities and put other people in mass jails. It's not good to increase the gap between rich and poor.
Are you at all hopeful that anything can be done to slow down the pace and acceleration of AI?
I don't believe we're going to slow it down.
Yeah.
And the reason I don't believe we're going to slow it down is because there's competition between countries and competition between companies within a country.
There's something quite haunting about the guy that made and was the main force behind GPT-2, which led rise to this whole revolution, left the company because of safety reasons. He knows something that I don't know about what might happen. It's amazing and terrifying at the same time. On this point of joblessness, it's something that I've been thinking a lot about in particular because I started messing around with AI agents. And we released an episode on the podcast actually this morning where we had a debate about AI agents with a CEO of a big AI agent company and a few other people. And it was the first moment where it was another moment where I had a eureka moment about what the future might look like. When I was able in the interview to tell this agent to order all of us drinks. And then 5 minutes later in the interview, you see the guy show up with the drinks and I didn't touch anything. And we put it on the screen in real time so everyone at home could see the agent going through the internet, picking the drinks, adding a tip for the driver, putting my address in, putting my credit card details in. And then the next thing you see is the drinks show up. And the other moment was when I used a tool called Replit and I built software by just telling the agent what I wanted. It's amazing and terrifying at the same time.
Remember that the AI, when it's training, is using code. And if it can modify its own code, then it gets quite scary, right?
Because it can modify
itself. It can change itself in a way we can't change ourselves. But I also think we might be able to. And it'd be sort of crazy if people went extinct because we couldn't be bothered to try.
If that's even a possibility, how do you feel about your life's work? Because you were...
Yeah. It sort of takes the edge off it, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, the idea is going to be wonderful in healthcare and wonderful in education and wonderful. I mean, it's going to make call centers much more efficient, though one worries a bit about what the people who are doing that job now do. It makes me sad. I don't feel particularly guilty about developing AI like 40 years ago, because at that time we had no idea that this stuff was going to happen this fast. We thought we had plenty of time to worry about things like that. When you can't get the AI to do much and you want to get it to do a little bit more, you don't worry about this stupid little thing is going to take over from people. You just want it to be able to do a little bit more of the things people can do. It's not like I knowingly did something thinking, this might wipe us all out, but I'm going to do it anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But it is a bit sad that it's not just going to be something for good. So I feel I have a duty now to talk about the risks.
And if you could play it forward and you could go forward 30, 50 years and you found out that it led to the extinction of humanity, and if that does end up being the outcome.
Well, if you played it forward and it led to the extinction of humanity, I would use that to tell people, to tell their governments that we really have to work on how we're going to keep this stuff under control. I think we need people to tell governments that governments have to force the companies to use their resources to work on safety.
He gave me a cautionary warning across his kitchen table in London, where he gave me an insight into the private conversations these people have, not the media interviews they do where they talk about safety and all these things, but actually what some of these individuals think is going to happen.
And what do they think is going to happen?
It's not what they say publicly.
No.
You know, one person who I shouldn't name, who's leading one of the biggest AI companies in the world, he told me that he knows this person very well, and he privately thinks that we're heading towards this kind of dystopian world where we have just huge amounts of free time. We don't work anymore. And this person doesn't really give a fuck about the harm that it's going to have on the world. And this person who I'm referring to is building one of the biggest AI companies in the world. And I then watch this person's interviews online. And I watch this person's interviews online and I reflect on the conversation that my billionaire friend had with me, who knows him. And I go, fucking hell, this guy's lying publicly. Like, he's not telling the truth to the world. And that's haunted me a little bit. It's part of the reason I have so many conversations around AI on this podcast, because I'm like, I don't know if I think some of them are a little bit sadistic about power. I think they like the idea that they will change the world, that they will be the one that fundamentally shifts the world.
We've actually solved the problem of immortality, but it's only for digital things.
So it will essentially know everything that humans know, but more, because it will learn new things.
It will learn new things. It will also see all sorts of analogies that people probably never saw. So, for example, at the point when GPT-4 couldn't look on the web, I asked it, why is a compost heap like an atom bomb? Off you go.
I have no idea.
Exactly. Excellent. That's exactly what most people would say. It said, well, the time scales are very different and the energy scales are very different. But then it went on to talk about how a compost heap, as it gets hotter, generates heat faster. And an atom bomb, as it produces more neutrons, generates neutrons faster. And so they're both chain reactions, but at very different time and energy scales. And I believe GPT-4 had seen that during its training. It had understood the analogy between a compost heap and an atom bomb. And the reason I believe that is, if you've only got 1 trillion connections, remember you have 100 trillion, and you need to have thousands of times more knowledge than a person, you need to compress information into those connections. And to compress information, you need to see analogies between different things. In other words, it needs to see all the things that are chain reactions and understand the basic idea of a chain reaction and code that, and then code the ways in which they're different. And that's just a more efficient way of coding things than coding each of them separately. So it's seen many, many analogies, probably many analogies that people have never seen. That's why I also think that people who say these things will never be creative, they're going to be much more creative than us, because they're going to see all sorts of analogies we never saw. And a lot of creativity is about seeing strange analogies.
People are somewhat romantic about the specialness of what it is to be human. And you hear lots of people saying, it's very, very different. It's a computer. We are, we're conscious. We are creatives. We have these sort of innate, unique abilities that the computers will never have. What do you say to those people?
I'd argue a bit with the innate. So the first thing I say is we have a long history of believing people were special. And we should have learned by now. We thought we were at the center of the universe. We thought we were made in the image of God. White people thought they were very special. We just tend to want to think we're special. My belief is that more or less everyone has a completely wrong model of what the mind is. Let's suppose I drink a lot or I drop some acid, and not recommended. And I say to you, I have the subjective experience of little pink elephants floating in front of me. And if you want to know what life's like when you're not the apex intelligence, ask a chicken. So there's risks that come from people misusing AI, and then there's risks from AI getting super smart and deciding it doesn't need us.
Is that a real risk?
Yes, it is. But we should recognize that this stuff is an existential threat. And we have to face the possibility that unless we do something soon, we're near the end. My main mission now is to warn people how dangerous AI could be. My main mission now is to warn people how dangerous AI could be.
Did you know that when you became the godfather of AI?
No, I was quite slow to understand some of the risks. Some of the risks were always very obvious, like people would use AI to make autonomous lethal weapons. That is, things that go around deciding by themselves who to kill. Other risks, like the idea that they would one day get smarter than us and maybe would become irrelevant, I was slow to recognize that. Other people recognized it 20 years ago. I only recognized it a few years ago that that was a real risk that might be coming quite soon.
How could you not have foreseen that if with everything you know here about cracking the ability for these computers to learn similar to how humans learn, and just introducing any rate of improvement?
But remember, neural networks 20, 30 years ago were very primitive in what they could do. They were nowhere near as good as humans at things like vision and language and speech recognition. The idea that you have to now worry about it getting smarter than people, that seems silly then.
When did that change?